So the museum gives you a sense of the unbelievable vitality and brilliance and inspiration of the young genius, Charles Dickens. He'd had a huge popular success with sketches by Boz, and had been commissioned to write the Pickwick Papers, which he had already embarked on, but he was living in rather cramped quarters in Furnival's Inn. He had a new wife and a new baby, indeed, and so emboldened by an advance of £100 from Richard Bentley to write a novel which they thought was going to be called Gabriel Varden, but finally, after many years and much thought, ended up as Barnaby Rudge. On the strength of that £100, he lashed out on this rather charming new build Regency House, just 30 years old when Dickens moved into it. And it was going to cost him £80 a year, sizable sum, £30 more than he'd been paying in Furnival's Inn. And he duly moved in. And there, in Doughty Street, he wrote the rest of the Pickwick Papers, had just started Oliver Twist, and so continued with that while he was writing the Pickwick Papers. And then while he was still writing Oliver Twist, he wrote all of Nicholas Nickleby. He also wrote some little books, the sketches of young gentlemen and sketches of young couples, and many letters. He was the most copious correspondent, and was editing Bentley's Miscellany and writing a great deal of it too. There was no end to the energy and life in that man, and it was manifested in his approach to the house as well. He made changes. He had things repainted, things installed, blinds particularly put in, and there he was, I think, possibly as happy as he ever was at any time of his life, with his wonderful young family. Another child was born there, Mary. His sister-in-law, Mary Hogarth, whom he absolutely adored, and his young wife, Catherine, whom he equally adored, and many friends. And his brother, Fred, was living there as well. And in addition to all of those people, there were servants. There was a cook, a housemaid, and a nurse, and eventually a manservant or a groom. Dickens was awfully fond of horse riding, so it wasn't a bad idea to have a groom. There he entertained, which he loved to do, and there he wrote from 8 o'clock in the morning to noon every day, but often when he was under great pressure with the magazine and whatever, he'd be still writing in the evening when friends were playing games and singing songs and having supper, and he'd nip in from time to time and read them extracts from what he was writing. It was a glorious time. It really was extraordinary. The first time he could really entertain properly, and he had lots and lots of friends round. Catherine supervised the cooking, although Dickens himself supervised the household management, drawing up careful accounts every month, very typically keeping a sharp eye on everything. He knew what poverty was, and he had no desire to experience it again. Also in this house occurred one of the great events of his life, which was the death of Mary Hogarth. Suddenly one night, after they'd returned from seeing Dickens's own play, Is She His Wife?, which he also wrote in Doughty Street, she suddenly died in his arms, an event that cast a curious shadow over the rest of his life. He never forgot her or that terrible moment in his life, and it actually is the only thing that ever stopped him actually writing. He stopped writing for a fortnight in that terrible year of 1837 when Mary died. But the important thing is that now that the house has been entirely restored, because with great thought and cunning financial management, the trustees of the Dickens Museum secured the house next door, which in which could go all the important things to do with running the museum. But the actual museum is by and large the house that Dickens lived in as he lived in it. And it's an extraordinary and a remarkable and a wonderful place. I'm sure most of the people who are listening to this know it, but they should spread it round to all their friends, and they should tell their MPs and tell everybody they possibly can that this museum, for anyone who loves Dickens, for anyone who loves literature, for anyone who loves English life, and anyone who loves one of the greatest accounts of what it is to be a human being and alive, is to be found in the works of this extraordinary, brilliant, dazzling, generous, sometimes difficult and sometimes downright unkind man who welled up with life, and his 58 years were filled every second with something creative, something inspired in literary terms, and as often as not, something for his fellow human beings. Some work or another, some committee work, some speech given somewhere. Everything was, for Dickens, as important as everything else. He gave himself as passionately to his charity work as he did to his literary work and to every other aspect of life. And I sometimes think that opening the door of 48 Doughty Street is like opening the door of a furnace ablaze with energy and life. And I'm going to read and record some of the stuff that Dickens wrote while he was here, during those 2.5 years here that he was here in Doughty Street. I'd like to give you a sense of what was coming from his pen at that time. Early Dickens, but among some of the most memorable books that he ever wrote, again, Pickwick Papers, Oliver Twist, Nicholas Nickleby, all full of indelible characters and extraordinary penetration of the human situation. But please do remember, this museum is in trouble, and it needs all the help it can get. Any contribution you can make of whatever kind is most gratefully, I should say, received. So thank you very much indeed, and I hope you enjoy what follows.